Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. We all go through tough times in our lives and we think, why me? Now, what do you do when your father dies suddenly, your mother commits suicide, and you are a young teenager and your entire safe life at home is overturned? Today's show is about resilience and choices that will get you to that next level. I'm joined by a Canadian icon, Riki Turofsky, soprano opera singer, philanthropist, author of Aria, A Song of a Life, and a lifestyle blogger for her women's site called suddenly70.ca. Riki, welcome to Empowered. Thank you so much for coming on today.
You're most welcome, Liz.
So let's begin. Why did you write your book?
Well, I had read a quote by Elie Wiesel, who was a Holocaust survivor, lived in the United States for many years, and it struck a chord with me. And it said, whoever survives a test must tell his story. That is his duty. And so when people were talking to me about, you should write a book, I thought, right, I should write a book. Perhaps it will be a way to help others who have gone through any kind of adversity in their lives.
Okay, so let's go back. Your childhood was great until you became a teenager. How did you cope with the drama of your life changes, your father's death, then your mother's sickness, and her ultimate suicide?
Well, when my father died, it was very unusual for someone of my age. And I felt watched. And, there's the girl whose father had died. But my mother fell into a deep depression and she suffered greatly from mental illness. We didn't know that, but she did. And she had a very difficult time accepting his death and her new life. And I just went about school and doing all the different things that I did, and tried to, in many ways, ignore what was going on at home. But it came to a head when the police arrived at my door to tell me, a young girl, that my mother had jumped from the top of the building, the Commerce building in downtown Toronto. So my life changed even
Wow.
more in
So
a flash.
So, how did you deal with your mother and the mental health issues and also being a teenager in high school? Because that's a lot to deal with.
It is. And what I did learn is that no matter how reasonable you are and how rational you are, someone who's suffering from mental illness doesn't get it. They're in their own world. And so I started reading Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. I went to high school every day. I did sports. I did all sorts of things. And I tried to ignore what was going on in my home. I'd come home from school. My mother would have the lights turned off because she thought we had no money. And, all that sort of thing. We had no food, no money. I took a job, and I dealt with it. I tried to be positive. And I really believe that being positive, it was part of my very special self. Perhaps I just put aside all the bad things and tried to look on the good side of things.
Well, you were young and you were trying to cope and survive, and you lived with total strangers who became your foster parents. What was that like? And did they include you into their family?
Well, I was so lucky, Liz, that I got into a foster family that was terrific. Both of Mr. and Mrs. White were school teachers, and he was a school teacher at my high school. And they decided they would take me on. Their daughter had gotten married, left the house, and so here they brought a young Jewish girl into a Christian home. They were simply wonderful, and I was very lucky. They convinced me to bring my mother's piano, which took over their entire living room, but have the music in my life. And I was a natural singer. I sang from the time that I could speak. And Mother White, but I started to call her Mother White, and Father White, they convinced me to sing. And their son-in-law was a music teacher and he played the piano. So we would have musical evenings. And it was, of course, wonderful for me in a way to come out. But I was very fortunate. I had very loving people, and they did include me in all sorts of family events. I started to feel like a member of their family.
And that's incredible because you had just been through hell And all of a sudden now, these wonderful doors had opened up for you so that you could actually start living a quote unquote normal life. We're going to go to break right now, Riki, but I do want to keep talking about your book and your life because it is fascinating. It's a fascinating journey of resilience and giving back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Empowered. I am Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, we're focusing on resilience in the life of Canadian icon Riki Turofsky. Riki, let's continue because I find your life fascinating and I know you, so I'm sure a lot of other people will feel the same way. So, okay, so now you've got this wonderful foster home, and then fast forward a little bit, you married a young doctor, and then you moved to Whitehorse and you got pregnant en route. So, was that deliberate?
Actually, it was deliberate because it was a choice between marrying Mort, a doctor, or going to the Banff School of Fine Arts. And he gave me a big diamond ring, and I thought, oh, this is wonderful. I'll be married. I'll be a married lady. I was 19 years of age. But I then thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do in Whitehorse? And where is Whitehorse? So I managed to get pregnant on the way. And I figured, well, that would, that's not the best reason to have a child, but nevertheless, that was my reasoning.
And so okay, so here you are now. You're in Whitehorse, and you don't have any family, friends, or anyone to support you, and your husband has an affair with a nurse there. Now, how did you deal with that? And then, of course, I'm assuming there's divorce.
Well, I had the baby and he had a divorce. He had a divorce. We did have a divorce, but he had an affair with a nurse, whose name, of course, I still remember. How did I deal with it? I did have friends. They were a lot older than I. They were 10 years older. Most of them were like 30. And but they were there. They were supports. They were people I could talk to. I mean, when you lived in Whitehorse, you walked a lot of places, even though there was a lot of snow. And I would visit and we'd have coffee and they helped me through it. But I had made a decision, fast decision. I'm a fast shopper and I'm a fast decision maker. And that was, how could I live with a man who wanted to be with another woman? And I gave him the opportunity to leave her, but he wouldn't. And so I left him. And in the Yukon, it was very, very quick to get a divorce. And I did. And then, of course, I had my baby. And had to figure out what to do next.
And so you had your baby and you had a divorce. Certainly that was empowering for you.
Well, it was at the time. I thought, wow, this is, I'm going to start a new life. And what had happened was a Canadian opera company had come up to the Yukon on tour in January. God knows why they came in January. But nevertheless, I heard all these singers singing and I thought, boy, I bet I can do that. I bet I can sing like that. And there was a wonderful woman who became the editor of Opera Canada, Ruby Mercer, who said that there was a program starting in Vancouver for young singers. So I thought, well, I can do this. And so that was an empowering moment for me. I just decided I was going to go to Vancouver with Carrie and set up house and see whether I would do university or whether I would go and try to get into this opera program.
And so tell us a little bit more about that, because here you are now, you're very, very young. You have a child, single mom. How did you deal with that?
Well, I was very fortunate. A friend of mine in the Yukon said, call my mother when you get to Vancouver. And it turned out Nanny Mac took us in. We lived in her place. I lived in the furnace room. Carrie was in the laundry room. She rented the upstairs to boarders. And I started to sing. And I went to an audition at the opera company, the Vancouver Opera Company, and they said to me, you've got a lot of nerve. And I thought that was a compliment. But they said, okay, I sang an aria I learned from a recording. And they must have heard something. They said, okay, go and learn a complete opera role. In fact, 2 roles, Mimi and La Boheme and Gilda and Rigoletto. And then come back to us in a month and let's see what you got. So there was an old piano in Nanny Mac's hall. And I worked so hard to learn those operatic roles. I read the original stories. I had studied Italian, so that was easy for me. But basically, I had never really had singing lessons. I tried to, but my getting married had interrupted that. So I did go back and I did audition again. And they said, stop, stop. And I went with the repetiteur, the coach, the gentleman who played the piano, and he took me aside and we played all sorts of parts of Rigoletto, Gilda. And then he said, come with me. So we went to the other gentleman who was here in the audition. Anyway, they were excited that I had a natural voice with high notes and could do all this stuff. And they offered
Riki,
me a full scholarship.
hold that thought. I want to hear more about that when we come back from this commercial break. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today's episode, we're focusing on the resilience and the life of Canadian icon Riki Turofsky. Riki, my apologies for interrupting you. And then what happened? They offered you.
Well, they offered me a full scholarship. They offered me a placement in the opera training program, which was fantastic. I was fortunate in that I had someone to look after Carrie. Nanny Mac's next door neighbor wanted to look after Carrie. I think she cost $10 a week. This tells you how the prices and everything has changed. This was in the late 60s. And I joined the program. I had to work like a Trojan because everyone else had been in music courses and they were all ready to go. I think there was a little resentment too that the new girl in town came in. And right away, I got all the leading parts in the ensemble. I sang. And it was pretty fantastic. And I got to understudy and see the big opera productions. Meanwhile, I met the music critic from the Vancouver Sun, and he was quite a bit older than I, but he fell for me, and I fell for him, of course. And he basically told me how he thought I should look, how I should speak, how I should walk, what I should wear, what I should sing. If I didn't sing the way he liked, he would tell me. So that was a whole new stage of my life, being sort of told what to do by a man, yet once again. But on the other hand, it was very exciting.
So as much as you were independent, you did like to rely on men, though. You just said it was exciting.
It was exciting. I did rely on him. And because he was a music critic, we went to every concert, we went to every ballet. We went to parties, and actually it was in many ways great because I learned a lot about music and about opera. But at one point in time, I learned more than he knew. And that was tricky because then he tried to keep me down. He tried to criticize me, even though I would get rave reviews from other people. I was sent to San Francisco and to Santa Barbara, and I performed there, and I had all these kudos. He would say, oh, no, but your high C was a little flat or whatever. And that made him more powerful. I did follow him to Toronto, and I came here to Toronto and went to the university and got a degree. And meanwhile, Carrie came along, of course. And Carrie grew up. She became a teenager. And I had an exciting life. I traveled a lot. I sang all over the world. Robert was a little dimmer in my life then, I guess, because I was growing so much. And we're talking about empowered. I was growing and I was getting stronger. And at a certain point in time, my daughter looked at me and said, you're kind of outgrowing Robert, aren't you? Which was a very mature thing for her to say. She said, I love him, but you are younger and there's so much you want to do. And so I sort of was given the opportunity and not feeling guilty to divorce Robert. And it seemed amicable at the time. And once I did, I realized I had to really work all the time and be totally sufficient. I had bought my own house. But in a way, it was very exciting for me. It was another corner turned when I felt, my goodness, this is not terrible being alone. Well, wasn't alone. I was with Carrie. She was growing up. Everything was terrific until she went to Mexico, picked up a E. coli virus, which we didn't know about, and she died. And at those days, they didn't pay a lot of attention to teenagers with stomach problems, but she was in Mount Sinai Hospital for about a week. And of course, you can imagine, I don't even think I have to describe to anyone what that's like in terms of my life, in terms of anyone's life. To lose a child is unnatural. Losing parents, well, I dealt with that. But to lose a child is not normal. And I just couldn't sing anymore. All the singing and music had gone out of me. And I had to deal again with, well, this time really alone, except I had her cat, Tigger. Which is a comfort. You can relate to that, Liz.
Yes.
But it was, again, I just couldn't sing. And so I decided to get involved in the arts in different ways. I went on boards. I supported the opera company and smaller arts groups and felt
Riki,
very.
I'm just going to stop you there right now because I'm getting into another segment now and I want to hear everything about the next tranche of your life. So please stand by. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. On today's episode, we're focusing on resilience and the life of Canadian icon Riki Turofsky. So, Riki, you were alone once more. Sadly, you stopped singing, and that breaks my heart because you were so good and your career was flourishing. And then all of a sudden, you stopped singing. Your heart was broken. Then you accidentally met your current husband now of 36 years. And he got involved in the arts in a different way than you got involved in the arts in a different way than as a performer. So I did cut you off a little bit before we went, but please tell us about that.
Well, the wonderful thing is that what helped, of course, heal a lot of the wounds that I was having was that I had a man who had 3 little boys who understood where I was coming from. And we had a great partnership and we have a great marriage, but we also believe very strongly in supporting not only the arts, but healthcare. And I think the arts, of course, need it. They need all the help that they can get. And that's given me a great deal of pleasure. Now, of course, I sing again just for my own delight with Neil, who is my foster parent son-in-law. And we do this just to have a good time. And I love going to the arts. I love going to Stratford Festival and the Opera Company and everything. And I feel so strongly that we just have a great, great lot of talent right now in Canada. And I love supporting them.
So you've become a philanthropist. I know you love supporting them. You're a lover of the arts and so many other things. But I want you to describe why this is so meaningful to you, because there are a lot of people that don't give back. And I believe that it's extremely important to give back to community, give back to the arts, or whatever it is that brings out your passion.
Well, I think it is important for all of us to give whatever we can, whether it's to food banks, whether it's to an opera company, whether it's to a hospital. We just have to. If we're fortunate enough to live well, then I'm a great believer in sharing. And it gives me great pleasure to say, for example, support a show at Stratford Festival and know that so many other people are enjoying that too. It gives me great pleasure to know that people on the streets can go to a food bank and get something to eat. And so I'm blessed. I am blessed. And I feel that that blessing has provided me with so much that I can share.
You know, I have to say, here you are saying how blessed you are, and yet you lived a life of heartbreak. And I'm sure that your heart is still broken, and it's very difficult to go through a loss of a child. Um, what words of wisdom do you have? We have about 2 minutes left. What words of wisdom do you have for someone who is a little bit broken, who's lost somebody, who is having a problem with letting go and feeling that they truly are blessed? How can we help somebody?
Well, the truth is, you never do let them go. I mean, every day carries in my life, and particularly when I see my friends who have their daughters around them. So that's part of it. And it's good to grieve. It's important to grieve. And whether you grieve at the anniversary of their death or whatever, or at holiday time. But it's also good to take one day at a time, as they say, and just make the best of your life and never give up. And know there are people worse off than you are. There are people better off than you are, too. But I think that's it. I think you just go along, wake up, get pleasure out of a beautiful rose, get pleasure out of a lovely garden, get pleasure out of whatever, whether the sun's shining or it's a wonderful rainy day and you can nap all afternoon. And I think, and maybe I'm lucky, maybe I was just born a Pollyanna, but that has helped me through problems. I still grieve. I will always grieve. But on the other hand, I will always laugh too.
And that's what's so special about you. You always see the bright side of everything. If you have, last 10 seconds, somebody who says, no, my life will never get to the positive side, what do you say to someone?
Well, I would say do things. I would say don't sleep in. I would say get up, look at the day, go for a walk, get an animal, get a pet. You can't get a dog, get a cat. Give love to something, support something, look beyond you. And my father used to always say, there's always somebody worse off than you are. And you can always do good. Go out and volunteer,
Thank you.
do something.
Thank you so much, Riki. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.